Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar today, Substantiating Claims for Hair Care. So those of you who've been following these webinars, you know that we've been looking at advertising legislation, different types of claims and how you substantiate them. And today we're looking at hair care in particular. This webinar is going to be recorded, so I'll be sending the recording link to everyone who has registered afterwards. There's also going to be the opportunity for questions and answers towards the end of the webinar. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to make a note of them, and we'll allow that time at the end as well. I also want to put a bit of a call to action out there. I've been making these webinars for a few months and I've gone through quite a few subjects that I found really interesting and I think have been really interesting to all of the participants, all of the viewers. But I really want to make sure that if there's anything that hasn't been covered that you are really interested in, please take the opportunity to email me at the end of the webinar today. I've got more free time now working from home, so I can really think about making some webinars if it's to do with a certain country that you're interested in and you want to advertise there, if it's to do with a certain type of testing, if it's to do with a certain type of product that you need to substantiate claims for. Please feel free to make some suggestions, and I'd really like to be able to host some webinars for you that are really specific to your needs at the moment. I'm just going to hand over to our founder and managing director, Susan Ayton, who's going to do an introduction to the webinar today.
Hi there. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I'm assuming if Carys can, that everybody else can. Thank you very much for the introduction, Carys. So my name is Susan Ayton. As Carys said, I'm the founder and managing director of Ayton Global Research. I've been in this area for well over 25 years now. We deal with brands all over the world, contract manufacturers, consultants, you name it, anything to do with claim substantiation. We deal with everybody who articulates in that arena. Obviously, we've had a bit of a jolt with the corona situation, and we put some very special procedures in place as soon as we knew that this might be an issue for our line of business. And in fact, our changes in procedures went back to January when we began to quarantine certain products that come in, because we mainly deal with studies that involve prototypes of products. And also many other procedures to make sure that our study managers can work effectively from home. So it's sort of situation normal for us, really. And we hope that everybody in our industry is managing to continue to pump out their new product development schedule. So yeah, basically, Carys is our regulatory advisor. I'm sure she'll introduce a little bit more about her role as we go through the slides today. But we're focusing on hair care today, where there are an enormous number of claims that you can make about your hair care products. As you know, you can't base your claims on raw ingredients. You need to base them on studies that are done by an independent research institute, usually split into two arenas, one being clinical and the other being empirical, and that's what we deal with. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you back to Carys.
Thank you, Sue. So today, as Sue mentioned, we're going to be talking about mainly consumer research. That's where our expertise lies. So we'll be talking about the different claims that you can make using consumer research, particularly for hair care. We'll also be looking at the legal framework for testing hair care and advertising hair care. So I'll be looking at that globally and then going to some countries specifically to give you an idea of what kind of advertising standards there are. In terms of regulations, we'll be looking at what they are for hair care and for marketing claims. And we'll be looking at the appropriate study design and methodology, particularly for hair care, and doing some case studies to really show you that methodology and how that's put into place and how you can get those claims substantiated. So as Susan introduced me, I'm the regulatory specialist for Ayton Global Research, and I also look at doing consultancy for any kind of consumer studies that are looking to be placed. This really includes like a gap analysis. So if you've got products that are either on the market or you're looking to launch, and you know what claims you want to make about the product, whether it comes from your raw ingredients or from your marketing team, I look at what evidence you have already in place and suggest the kind of claims and the kind of tests that you'll need to conduct to make sure that they are legally compliant in the markets that you are looking to launch those products. So my experience has really come from working with clients as a study manager, managing their studies and designing their studies and questionnaires, to then going into sort of training and the training involved in our staff, but also to our clients. And now specifically looking at the regulations and how that's impacting all of the study designs and everything like that we all need to put into place, and all of the procedures that we need to have in place to make sure that all of our studies are completely compliant to making sure that your claims are substantiated. So if you need any more information about regulatory kind of aspects of consumer research or claims substantiation, please always feel free to contact me, or if you've got a certain project in mind, and I'll be really happy to discuss that with you further. So I want to start off by talking about the hair care market in general. I'm sure it's no surprise to any of you that the hair care market is absolutely huge. It's a really great market to be in. If you're any kind of cosmetics or toiletries developer, or if you own a brand, it's an excellent market to be in because it's forever growing and it's forever needed. There's kind of no point where people don't want to do stuff with their hair, they don't want to treat their hair and look after it. And especially in the climate that we're in now, and I'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. So we've got some kind of market research that's really public out there in the information at the moment, but kind of pointing out kind of needs, demands at the moment in the hair care industry. So there's definitely a growing demand for organic and natural products. And there's also a real concern about people thinking about the hair aesthetics and scalp nourishment. So really thinking about the health of the hair rather than just making sure it looks healthy, really going to that kind of scalp health and making sure that their hair is always healthy kind of from the get-go. So it's kind of in my kind of few years of being in the industry, I've noticed it's kind of gone from being like, I want to have bleached hair, I want to have hair that's really like looking at doing things to it that might damage it anyway, to now people are really interested in getting that health back in their hair, especially if they have previously had treatments on it. And that's, I think, why the kind of organic and natural growth has really taken part as well, because it's often associated that natural and organic products are going to be better for your hair. We know that's not necessarily always true, but it's something to really consider in your marketing as well. So the impact of COVID-19 on hair care. So as I said, now is actually a brilliant time to be in the hair care market, because although COVID-19 has really hit a lot of industries very hard, in particular, for example, the color cosmetics industry, where people aren't able to leave their homes, so they're not really worried about putting on makeup or anything like that, there's a huge demand still for hair care, especially in the US. So I've kind of pointed this one out from the US, but really worldwide. But this is, again, because people are at home, they are able to experiment with different things for their hair. Maybe it's different colors, maybe it's different treatments, but also they want to look after their hair. The same as skincare market as well. People are really interested in kind of having that self-love while they're at home and looking after what they've kind of got. So a really good time to actually be in the hair care industry. If you're already currently there, or if you're looking to launch into it, continue with your product development regardless of COVID-19, because you are likely to still be making excellent sales. So I want to talk about advertising standards firstly. So for every country that I'm going to talk about, they all have self-regulatory organizations. And these self-regulatory organizations is what deal with marketing in their country. And they deal with the complaints from the consumers and the competitors. So the International Chamber of Commerce have a framework which the countries can adopt to have that for their own self-regulatory organizations. And that's currently adopted in 42 countries worldwide. Those 42 countries are most likely the countries that you're generally looking to market in. They're the biggest markets, especially for hair care. So it's really important to be familiar with that framework, as well as looking at the individual countries as well. Generally, the idea is they're ensuring legal, honest, decent, and truthful communications in advertising. On a slightly lower level than that, you've got ICAS, which is the International Council on Ad Self-Regulation. Now, they were started by the EASA, which is the European Advertising Standards Alliance, but they're actually a worldwide organisation. So basically, it's a council where all of these self-regulatory organisations can come together, share their code of conduct, share a code of practice, and make sure they're all kind of putting ideas forward so that the advertising in every country that is part of ICAS is following that same rules about being legal, honest, and truthful, and decent, and fair as well. So it's a really good place to go if you're kind of looking at starting to launch your product, or if you're looking at advertising standards, because they've got a whole database of everyone that's a member of them. And you know that the news that they're releasing through the ICAS website will be applicable in all of those countries. So that's a really good place to start. If you're not sure about who the advertising standards are in the country that you're looking to advertise, you can go to ICAS first and have a look at that database. So here's some examples of people that are part of ICAS. So in the UK, you've got the Advertising Standards Authority. In Australia, you've got Ad Standards. USA, you've got the Federal Trade Commission, but I'll talk about that. It's a little bit different. In India, you've got the Advertising Council of India, and in China, you've got China Advertising Standards. So these are all self-regulatory organizations that are monitoring ads and dealing with complaints about ads in their countries. There's a huge database. This is kind of just, again, I'm bringing out markets that I know that a lot of our listeners are really interested in. I want to talk about the Federal Trade Commission because they are different. They're not part of the ICAS global spreadsheet. They are a government organization that is put in by the USA. So whereas sort of self-regulatory means that, you know, it's not part of the government, then they work with the government to make sure that there's laws in place to be about fair advertising. Whereas the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, are actually law enforcement. They're enforcing those laws. It means they have quite a lot more power than other countries because they're able to actually police advertising, and they're able to kind of start lawsuits, maybe sue people if they've gone against their code of conduct and if you've had unfair advertising. So I know a lot of people sell in America, and I think most people, even if you don't yet, you probably want to. It's a huge market, especially again for hair care. So it's really important to make sure you're very aware of the FTC's laws and rules when it comes to advertising, because you could have a much more severe punishment that you might have in other countries. But again, always check those countries. Again, there's other SROs that might have similar power in the UAE. They've got the same thing where their SROs actually work with the government and they're law enforcement. So again, you could be going against laws rather than just against a code of conduct. And there could be much harsher punishments in place for going against those advertising laws. So I want to talk about advertising laws as well. So you might find that for every country that you're looking at advertising in, you have the SRO who polices it, that deals with the complaints. But there are also laws that you might offend that aren't necessarily about the code of conduct of the SRO, and it's just a law, so it needs to be done anyway. So I've taken out a few examples of laws that are in place in certain countries, but again, always research this. I can't kind of push it enough. You can't just rely that if you've got sort of evidence for your claims, maybe from the UK, and you're selling in the USA, that it will have the same code of conduct, that you'll be able to use it in the same way. There could be other things in place, and you really don't want to end up sort of in trouble or anything like that. So that's kind of the picture about advertising regulation and organizations. But the main thing is, as I mentioned, if you're getting a complaint about your product, whether it's from a competitor, a consumer, and those SROs are coming up to you and saying, right, we need to have this evidence about this claim. You need to prove that the product actually does what it's saying. How do you get that evidence? So I'm going to talk about consumer research today, because that is what we as an organization offer. So the consumer research studies are about the consumer's perception of the product. It's not about the science that you might get from a clinical study or from an instrumental study, but it is just as important, if not much more important. This is because a scientific study can tell you, for example, about a wrinkle cream. It could look at the wrinkles. You could apply the wrinkle cream for 4 weeks, and you can use a camera to say, yep, the wrinkles have definitely diminished by this much, by this percentage. But if you put that on the market and your consumer says, this has not improved my wrinkles at all, where's your evidence to substantiate that? If you haven't got the consumer perception evidence, and you never prove that the consumer could perceive it with their naked eye anyway, you'll still come under scrutiny and your advert could still be removed. So there's a lot of cases where you can just use consumer research for your claim. And there's some cases where you need both the scientific evidence and the consumer research to substantiate your claims. So the the consumer research, the claims that you might get just from consumer research are anything to do with the subject's feeling towards the product. So it could be something to do with my skin looks younger. I received compliments about my skin. My skin is glowing. It feels radiant. Anything that is really an emotive claim that you couldn't get through science, that can be done just through consumer research. They also reflect the actual conditions of a product in use. So it's all very well good again, getting a consumer to go to a laboratory and have a dermatologist apply a product on their face. But that's not how your consumer is going to use the product when they purchase it off your shelf. So it's really important to get that data. So when you're developing your product, you know exactly the results that you'll get if they were to be launched on the market. So it's really, really important. For some claims, you may need additional evidence. And again, that's where my speciality lies. I can look at your claims and tell you what kind of claims you can just do a consumer research test for, and what kind of claims that you might also need that scientific evidence for. So why else might you conduct consumer studies? We've talked about advertising your claims. Substantiating your advertising claims. We've talked about testing the product efficacy a little bit, but again, that's a really big part of the new product development process. You might find that if you don't test your product and you go straight to kind of the final product and get that to have your claim substantiated, you could have missed something really important earlier on in your product development. It could be to do with the fragrance of the product. Maybe the participants don't like the fragrance, and you've kind of got to go back to the drawing board before you've even managed to get it at the point where you've already got the product final. They might not like the color of the product. All these little things are really an excellent way to be using consumer research and getting that feedback really early on. You're also ensuring that your product is legally compliant in your chosen markets. So again, consumer research, we can conduct studies globally. Because generally consumer research methodology is about sending the products about sending the products to a consumer to use in their own home and answering an online questionnaire about it, we can literally send the products anywhere in the world and get that feedback. So no matter where you want to launch your product, you can really understand your key market and really understand how that product is accepted and what the propensity to buy is in those territories. You can also find out the demographic generally in those chosen territories as well. If you know you want your product to be for, say, it's an anti-aging product and you want it to be for women between the ages of sort of 35 and 50, you need to test your product on that demographic straight away. Because again, if they're not liking the product, if they're not accepting it, you can't market your product towards that market necessarily. Same as if it was a unisex product, you'd want to have it on both women and men. So there's some examples of claims that you can make from consumer research as well, and I've made them specific to hair care. So 88% of people agree their hair felt smooth all day. 9 out of 10 people would recommend their product to a friend. Again, you cannot get that through scientific research, and they are the kind of claims that really speak to your consumer. If you have in your advert that people would buy the product or people would recommend it to friends, that is the kind of claim that will make you sell your product. We've also got things like 96% of people agree that this product protected their colour from fading. So again, as Sue mentioned, the hair care claim sort of catalogue is huge. It's incredibly huge, and it keeps growing. People keep developing new products with new treatments for hair, with new things that attributes that can be seen on the hair, new benefits. So it's kind of unlimited, and another reason why consumer research is great for that, because they're the kind of claims that maybe aren't necessarily scientific. They're the kind of claims that literally you can just perceive when you use the product. So some common criteria for claims. So I've taken this from the EU Cosmetic Products Regulation. Again, if you're not in the EU, this still applies to any kind of market that you're looking at selling your product in. It's just they break it down in a really easy to digest way. So they have their 6 common criteria for cosmetic claims. So we're looking at legal compliance. Now, this is to do with making claims, for example, this product is compliant with EU regulations. You can't make that claim on your product because you're not allowed to sell it in the EU if it doesn't comply with those regulations. So it's really important to kind of be very clear that the claims you're making aren't just given. You know, they can't just be something that has to be done by law. They have to be relevant to the product. They have to be truthful. So you can't say your product contains vitamin C if it doesn't contain vitamin C. It's quite simple there. They have to have evidential support. So again, this is what this whole webinar is about. It's about having that evidential support to have behind your claim and how you get that support. They have to be honest. You can't say it was in a consumer test on 250 people if you only ran the study on 100. You have to be very honest with that. They have to be fair. If you're looking at a comparison study and you are comparing an anti-dandruff shampoo to a shampoo that doesn't have any anti-dandruff properties, and you're saying that it makes your hair more flake-free, That's not fair. You haven't made a fair test there. It would have to be against a product that has a similar kind of ingredient in terms of an active that would be able to have that benefit. You have to allow your consumers to have informed decision making. Your claims need to be very, very clear and in a language that your consumers can understand. We see it quite a lot when we have all this scientific jargon that's on products, and it's making sure that if you're going to put that kind of information on your products, you make it very clear what the benefits are of that scientific kind of wording that you have on there. You need your consumers to be able to understand. What types of claims are there? So again, the Cosmetics, Toiletry and Perfumery Association, which is another EU organisation, but again, even if you're not in the EU, they're an incredibly helpful resource when it comes to looking at claims for any kinds of cosmetics, including hair care. So in terms of what kind of claims, they've broken the claims down and said what kind of evidence that you need for each kind of claim. So we've got sensory claims, which is obviously about the sense of the product. How does it feel? How does it look? So again, that's all can be done through consumer research. The performance claims about the efficacy. Again, we could talk about anti-dandruff. Does it actually reduce the flakes in the hair? Ingredient claims, so make sure that if you say your product's got an ingredient in it, you can put that on your packaging, but it has to have a certain level according to the regulation in the country that you are advertising in to be able to say that claim. You can't just say it has the ingredient, have a very small percentage. There's regulations for every country about what kind of level of that ingredient you have to have in there to be able to say that claim. Product aesthetics claims, so that's to do with the product itself, but it can also be to do with the packaging. So do people like the packaging that it's in? Combination claims, these are really, really common in hair care because you'll see a lot of the time when you're purchasing hair care products on the market, use this shampoo with this conditioner for best results. So you need to test those products together. You can't say that claim if you've got no evidence that those products together are giving you the best results. So that's a really great one for hair care and really good thing to consider when you're doing your testing. Comparison claims. So this can be to do with maybe testing against a competitor, something we see a lot in the USA, where you might say this product is better than this particular brand. Or you can say it against maybe a formula. So you could be saying this is a new and improved formula. You could test your old formula against your new one and get that evidence to say that it's significantly better. You've got subjective claims, so that's very much consumer perception studies. That is your consumer research because it's saying about the subject themselves. So it's everything, this is the silkiest soft my hair has ever felt. That's a subjective claim. That's not science. That is that subject having that opinion. Whereas the objective claims are very much about the science. So that is everything to do with exactly like we were saying earlier, maybe it might be the hair is stronger. You have to have that science behind it to say that scientifically the hair is definitely stronger. Talking about where we use those claims now. So we've got the claims, we've got our evidence. Where do we want to use those claims? So there's a really important announcement that was put out by ICAS. So as we were talking about earlier, a lot of the global SROs are a part of that council. But they were saying about claims on labels and packaging. Now, historically, the SROs in each country haven't policed the kind of claims that you see on packaging. They've just looked at adverts that have been put into the public domain, either online or through broadcasting, anything like that, through magazines, through print. But it's become very apparent now that obviously the claims that are put on packaging are actually quite strong. They're not just kind of saying this is a shampoo. They'll be saying things along the line of a clarifying shampoo. It's descriptive, but it still needs evidence behind it to say that those claims, are actually able to do what they're saying they do. So it's really important to make note that even if you aren't putting claims online or anything like that, it doesn't mean you don't need consumer research. It doesn't mean that you don't need evidential support, because even the claims that you're putting on your packaging are now able to be put under scrutiny by your competitors or by your consumers. Other examples of where you might see claims, so online. So we've got a few different products here that I've picked up online that have all got all of their consumer research and their claims put underneath the product. So you've got some claims there for Philip Kingsley Flaky Itchy Scalp Shampoo. You've got one for a L'Oreal Soothing Shampoo, and you've got one for Head and Shoulders Men's Shampoo. So you can see the kind of claims that they've put on their website and how they can use that substantiation there to be able to back up those claims. You also see claims on TV. And you have to be able to say you have to kind of quote what the panel was and how people agree with the claims whilst it's on television. So we've got one from John Frieda where they're saying 78% of 55 women agreed. We've got one from L'Oreal again, so 72% of 258 women agree. And there's also a claim here, it's not very clear, I'm aware, from Pantene, where they're talking about how it makes hair stronger, and they're talking about strength against, so versus a non-conditioning shampoo. So they have to put, if they're saying it makes your hair stronger, they have to say, what was that compared against? So it's really important you've got that evidence again, so that you can be able to use your claims on TV. People want to be able to use their claims on TV because it's a great way of getting your products out there. You also need to think about it if you're looking at doing shopping channels. So any kind of script that's on a shopping channel, for example, QVC, I've pulled out QVC as an example because they very much dominate the shopping channel industry. So you need to make sure that all of your, you've got claim substantiation in place before you can even apply to have your product on any kind of shopping channel like QVC. And every bit of script that they're talking about, so, when you're watching one of these channels and they're able to talk about these products for sort of half an hour, it's really impressive because everything they're talking about has to have evidential support. They can't just make it up on the spot. It needs to be verified. So the QVC, I've kind of listed their requirements, so you can have a look at that as well. And it's really important to note that they need to also have the kind of name, address, phone number of the certified independent testing house. So you can't you test it on your staff or something like that and say, yeah, these claims are substantiated because our staff absolutely love it. You need to have a certified independent testing house that you can use, and you can use their evidence when you put forward your product, to go on to kind of shopping channels or anything like that. So now I've talked about where you can see your claims, I'm going to talk about the case studies as promised. So obviously we're talking about consumer research here. There are so many different methodologies that we have conducted for hair care. There are so many different claims that we've substantiated for hair care. There is a huge catalogue. So I've taken 2 case studies out of the mix to kind of give you an idea of varies and ideas of how they split panels and things like that, just to kind of try and summarize it all. But yes, like I said, I think hair care is probably one of the biggest when it comes to claims and the kind of claims people want to put out there marketing wise. So we'll look at these 2, and if you've got any other further questions about other kinds of claims, feel free to ask at the end as well. So I want to start off by talking about a curl shine oil that we tested for a contract manufacturer, one of the largest European contract manufacturers. And basically, the reason I want to bring this one out is because they were looking at substantiating the claim that it's suitable for all curl types. So if you have worked in any kind of hair care product development and looked at kind of developing for curly hair, you'll know that hair curl type is broken down from 2A all the way through to 2A, 2B, 2C, and then the same for 3, the same for 4. And it basically goes from like a loose wave to a very, very coily sort of afro kind of hair. So to be able to say claim for all curl types, we really need to make sure we've got a substantial amount of people with each curl type on our panel. Otherwise, that's not going to be substantiated. So I want to bring out some legislation here to kind of put into context where I've talked about SROs and I've talked about advertising standards. How's that put into context with making these, doing these consumer studies and making these claims? So the EASA, so obviously this is a European brand that are mainly looking at advertising the product around Europe. So this is the kind of best place to be looking for the information there. So they are very clear that you need to have the evidence in place for any kind of claims that you have before you put the product on the market. So before you kind of put your advertisements out there, you can't kind of backtrack and say, oh, now I need to get the evidential support. You need to make sure you have it before you go on the market. And this is because if an SRO gets a complaint about your product, you need to be able to give them that information immediately. So obviously they say about delay, there are timelines in place for these things, but for your own peace of mind and to be confident, I would always recommend having that evidence in place before you even think about putting the product onto the market. So the study protocol for this was reasonably simple because we were generally just looking at the curl type. So it's a single placement product, which means there's one product being investigated. It was 14 days because we're just looking at the styling ability of the hair. So there's no ongoing kind of claims about the product that would have a build up over time. It's where it's a curl oil. It's basically making those curls look nice and defined and shiny. We're looking at female and male because they want it to be a unisex product. There was a weight more towards female products because that was the biggest market. And again, we can really help with information about designing panel requirements like that. We had 12% of each curl type because we had 9 curl types in total. And this meant that we had to have a really large study of over 360 people because we had to make sure there's a substantial amount of each curl type. You can't do a study on 100 people and say, I want 12% of each curl type. The data behind each curl type would be so insignificant. You wouldn't be able to make that claim. So you really need to make sure your data is really robust. It also means that if you found out that maybe everyone from 2A to 2C didn't actually suit their hair, it really suited the more curly hair, the more 3A to 3C and 4A to 4C, you can then take out that 2A to 2C data, don't advertise it towards them, only focus on the other curl types, and you've still got that really robust data there to substantiate those claims. So you're kind of giving yourself a bit of leeway with these. Like I said, it's all about claim substantiation, it's about evidential support, but it's also research. It's also finding out what your product does and making sure that you can use your marketing to make those claims. So what were the results? So I've taken a few questions out of our report. So for those of you that haven't used our software before, we have real-time reporting in place. So this is really, really handy if you are in new product development again, or if you're part of a marketing team, because it means you haven't got to wait at the end of the study for us to analyse the results and provide you with a final report. It's all built into our software. So we've got 11 different types of statistical analysis that are readily built in. So when one volunteer answers a questionnaire, it immediately does the analysis, and you can already see the kind of percentage layout for the claims as soon as they've answered that questionnaire. So we've got a summary report at the end of each questionnaire after we've done a kind of individual breakdown, which is a table that looks like this. So you've got your questions on the left-hand side, you've got the number of people that were satisfied, the number of people that were neutral, and the number of people that weren't satisfied, and then again the percentage of people satisfied, neutral, and not satisfied. Now the percentage is really what you're going to be looking at, because that's where you're literally lifting your claim. So you'd be saying for the first question, 77% of 300 something women, sorry, I don't know how many it was, 300 something women said that they loved this hair oil. So you can lift that straight into your marketing. You can see there's little asterisks as well by the claims, by the percentages, sorry. That's because we can put our pass mark straight into our software as well. So if you were looking at a pass mark of 70%, so you want to say that you can only use the claims that 70% of people agree with, we can build that all into our software. So we only get an asterisk for the ones that have reached that percentage. So any that get an asterisk, you can use in your marketing straight away. Again, you haven't got to wait for any kind of analysis there. So these are all claims that have obviously passed over the 70% pass mark. We can talk as well about pass marks if you're not sure about what you should be setting for your product, and you can feel free to get in touch about that. So we were looking at kind of making sure it was good for all the hair types, and the kind of claims that they got for that, about having the hair oil. It's got a good control for frizz. It makes their hair feel smooth. It gives them an amazing shiny gloss. And we basically broke that down into all of the curl types and made sure that there was a percentage. This is the overall report, sorry. But we made sure that if we broke it down into hair type, that there was a pass mark for every single hair type as well, so they could make that claim for all of those different attributes that they want the hair oil to be able to do. So again, we had a report for every single hair type. So we had 9 reports in total from 2A to 4C, and they could break down those reports and have a look exactly like this, the same kind of summary table. But then this is also the overall data. So when you put it into your marketing, as long as all of the hair types have agreed with the claim, you can use that really large panel base and put it into your marketing. The other product I want to talk about is a hair care brand that we're testing a blonde correcting regime. So this was a shampoo and a mask. So because it's blonde correcting, they were really looking at making sure that the products are able to remove any kind of brassy tones in the hair, that they're neutralizing. And they also wanted to gather before and after photos for further evidence. So again, hair care is one of those one of those sectors that we really see a lot of before and after photos in. So through consumer studies, you're able to either get people to take in-home photos, so just take the product while they're at home, which is what we did for this study. You can also do professional photos. So we've done that for tooth whitening studies before, where we get a professional photographer to come in and take pictures of people's teeth. Again, you can do that for hair. We've done video testimonial things for hair care. So the volunteer will use the product in home, and then they'll video themselves talking about their experience of using that product. That's very popular for people that have a large Instagram following, because you can mash up all of those volunteer photos, get those kind of clips of them saying great things like, you know, this really removed the brassy tones from my hair has never felt softer, I'd recommend this product to anyone that wants to neutralize their blonde. And you can mash those all together and use that on your advertising. So it's really, really popular. There's kind of no limit when it comes to what you can do with consumer research. And it's just really having those kind of clear ideas of how you want to put your marketing out there, what kind of platforms you want. And then we can really design a study that is going to really reflect that. So back to this particular product. Now this one was being advertised in the UK because that was the main market. So it's going to be advertised worldwide eventually, but it's one of those products that we were going to start off locally and then think globally. So we want to make sure that it's obviously substantiated in the country that they are currently marketing in. So this is from the ASA, which is the Advertising Standards Authority. And they say that for health, beauty and slimming claim substantiation, which is what hair care fits under in their code of conduct, any sensorial claims which are based on opinion must be substantiated with consumer research data. As mentioned, these are sensorial claims. These are about opinion, because you're getting the opinion of people that their hair looks better, they prefer it without the brassy tones removed, and they can really see a difference, they've noticed a difference in using the product. It's everything that only that consumer can say themselves. It needs to be backed up by consumer research data. So the study protocol for this one, obviously it's a regime of a shampoo and a mask, a hair mask. It's a 28-day study, because we're really looking at that overall gradual process. So you might find that brassy tones are removed after one use, but you know that after a month, the brassy tones are really going to have neutralized by then. So it had to be that long. We wanted to break down the different types of blonde. So we had natural blonde, bleached blonde and dyed blonde, but they all had to have some kind of brassiness or discoloration in their blonde to obviously to be able to prove that it was getting rid of it and making it a more white blonde. They couldn't have dyed their hair very recently or used a toner very recently, because that would negate the results. So obviously, discoloration and brassiness happens over time. I myself get my hair highlighted. I know I come out of the salon and it's still that lovely white blonde. A couple of weeks later, it's gone to a bit of a yellow and I need to use some kind of toner on it. So we had to make sure that people hadn't done it really recently, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to see a difference. We also need to make sure that the data is national. So we wanted to look over the whole of the UK, because they're advertising their product over the whole of the UK. If you specify a certain city, you're not necessarily reflecting everyone's opinion. So I just want to take out a couple of the before and after photos. So as mentioned, these were just taken in the participant's home, but you can see that from the before, they had quite a yellowy blonde, and afterwards it has gone that really, really white colour that they're kind of hoping for with a product like this. So I've just taken out one kind of example of before and after photos for you, but again, it's something that we are very able to offer. Also want to talk about the results for this one. So again, we've got that summary table. We've got our percentages of satisfied. We are looking at claims to say the brassy tones were neutralized, that the yellow tones were reduced, their hair colour was corrected, their hair colour looked clarified, and their warm tones are cooled. So everything that you want to get from this kind of product, and they've got some fantastic claims there to use in their marketing, all over 80%. That's going to look brilliant online, it's going to look brilliant in print, it's going to look brilliant on TV, and they can use this in all of their marketing, and their consumers are going to be very, very happy with those results. So that's our case studies. Once you've got all of the information that we provide in our case studies, you need to know how you're going to file that information. So obviously, if you go to a distributor, or you go to a place that you want to market your product, like a marketing platform, or if you go to a new country and you need to prove your claims of substantiation, you need to provide that product information file. So this includes everything that you need to know, that anyone would need to know, about your product. It's got all of your safety data, it's got all of your ingredients listings, but it also needs to include your evidence for your claim substantiation, including who conducted the research. So it's really important to know that you're using a consumer research provider that has that is accredited. It also contains any undesirable effects that have been reported, and that's not just during our consumer research trials, but it could also be during your safety testing. So it's another really good thing about consumer research data, because obviously you get undesirable event reporting when you do any kind of clinical testing or you do any kind of safety data testing, but obviously it's on a very, very small panel. So it's only so reliable as the people that it's being tested on. When you do a consumer research study, so for example, we did our Curl type one that had 360 participants. We did our brassy tones one that had 150 participants. You know that you're putting on that large scale, and you are more likely to find if there was going to be an irritant in the product that could cause an undesirable event, it's much more likely to get picked up on in a bigger study. So it's really important for you to know. I'm not talking about serious undesirable events. I'm talking about something, it might be that my scalp felt a bit itchy, I had a bit of a burning sensation. Those kinds of claims that if you put it on the market and you had kind of all these products, all of these people reporting it, you might have to recall your product. We had, in terms of hair care, we actually had a study recently that was for a hair care appliance. So we don't just have to do cosmetics. We can do things like straighteners, hair dryers. We put out a hairdryer study, and unfortunately there was a technical fault and we had to recall all of those hairdryers. Now this isn't, it's horrible news. No manufacturer wants to find that when they're testing their product, but at the same time, if they'd put that on the market, can you imagine doing a product recall not from 100 hairdryers that had gone out in a consumer study, but to the thousands that had gone on the market? We managed to save them in the end a lot of money, even though it was really upsetting and disappointing for them that they found this technical fault. It's just a very much one of those moments of, well, thank God it didn't go onto the market and have to get recorded on such a large scale. So it's all these kinds of little things that you really find out from doing consumer research. Again, we don't want to have bad results. We don't want to have undesirable events. We don't want to have product recalls, but you would much rather have that in a consumer research setting than in on the market itself. It's quite rare, I will say that, so you don't panic. It's always quite rare, but it is still, we do still see it. So why should you use us for your consumer research? So as I've already mentioned, we have undesirable event reporting. Now that's run alongside any kind of study where you have your main questionnaire, and then at any point, the volunteers can go on and say they've experienced an undesirable event. They have an emergency number for us. So if it was a case of a serious undesirable event, they could call us immediately. I've never experienced a serious undesirable event while I've been at Ayton Global Research, and that's coming on about 9 years now. So it's not likely. But if it was the case, we always make sure we have the procedures in place that are compliant with the Cosmetovigilance Act as well. Your responsible person also has access to that undesirable event data. So if they do submit a form, and if they do sort of say they have had an effect and they've reported what that is, your responsible person can have access to that in real time as well, which means that if they need to investigate it any further, they absolutely can. But it also means you can just generally download it and have it in your product information file very easily. We've got product liability insurance. Not every research provider does, but they really should, because obviously we're putting your products into the hands of our participants. So we need to make sure that they are obviously insured in case there was, like I said, in that very unlikely event of a serious undesirable event. We can make sure that we are covered for it as well as yourselves. We are compliant with GDPR. So we've got an ISO 27001, which reflects this compliance. We also have our own data protection officer. So this is really important because obviously we're handling very sensitive data from our participants, everything from their hair color to their sexual preferences. That is the kind of data that we have to have about our participants, and it's so sensitive. It's really important to make sure that it is all protected. So we also need to make sure we're protecting your data. So as our clients, things like your INCI list, that's all really, really sensitive data that you don't want to have released. So we have to make sure that we are really on top of it all. So even if you're not part of the EU and GDPR doesn't affect you, you may find that there are certain compliance that you have to have in place to advertise your product in certain markets or to use your advertising somewhere. And they'll make sure that you have things like anonymized data. So it's really important to make sure that actually if you're dealing with a consumer research company that is GDPR compliant, they'll be compliant in any country with data protection. We're also a partner to the Market Research Society. So obviously we follow their code of conduct very, very strictly there, which basically means that you know that the research that we're doing is proper and it's ethical. So any kind of questionnaire design, anything to do with rewarding the participants, that's all put through the Market Research Society to make sure we're putting out completely unbiased data and giving you completely unbiased data for your products. Further kind of advice. So suggested panel size starting at 100 responses. As mentioned, in the kind of case studies we looked at, it's not always the case, because it could be that you have a panel split. That means you need to have a significant amount of people in every single panel split. But if you're just looking at one kind of panel requirement and one kind of claim, 100 responses would be usually significant. And again, we can give you some information about that. I've already talked a little bit about product liability insurance there. I've already talked a little bit about safety testing, but it's important to note that before you do any kind of consumer testing, that your products have been safety tested to the point where they can be released on the market. We can't have any participants using products that haven't been safety tested, because we don't want to give them any unnecessary irritations, and you don't want any unnecessary undesirable events reported either. All samples should be debranded for any kind of claim substantiation or for any kind of comparison testing. The only time that I would say that you don't need them debranded is if you want feedback on the branding itself. So generally, always as a flat rule, make sure that your samples are debranded. We can ensure that your questionnaire design will support your claims. So as mentioned, if you give us a list of kind of claims that you're looking for, we can design a questionnaire that will make sure that it's completely compliant, it goes with the Market Research Society requirements, and that you'll be able to use it for your claims that you want to make. I just want to finish off looking at some examples of removed adverts. So obviously we've talked about evidential support and how important it is and what those SROs are, but what does it look like when unfortunately you can go against the advertising standards authorities and your adverts are removed? So these are some examples of products that have had to have their hair claims removed or have their adverts removed because of misleading claims. The unfortunate thing with this is that you're not necessarily saying that the product doesn't do what it says. It could. So for example, Pantene saying that it makes hair stronger, same as L'Oreal, Hairbest saying that it makes hair grow longer and stronger. These claims could be very much true, but if you haven't got evidential support to back it up, you can't use that advert. So I think it's just so important, instead of having that kind of bad press that's put out there that you get when you they're all very public, by the way, especially the FTC and especially the ASA. You can go on their website and you can see all of this very, very publicly when they uphold complaints about this product. So it's not great press for your brand when actually, like I said, that product could very much do what it says. You just haven't got the evidence to back it up. So it's really, really important to make sure you have that evidence. So I'm going to open up to a Q&A now. I hope that's been really helpful. Let me have a look and see if anyone has come in and had any questions so far, and feel free to start writing questions as well. So I've had one question in so far, and it says, are you aware of any particular anti-dandruff claims for non-EU markets, not including the USA and Canada? Are you aware of any particular anti-dandruff claims for non-EU markets? So, well, it really depends. It really depends on the market. So there's anti-dandruff claims worldwide. It would really help if I knew what kind of market you're looking at in particular. But there is always ways of looking at it. The main thing is making sure that you know the product category for your claim in the territory that you're looking at. So, if you're looking at advertising an anti-dandruff product, you might find that it comes under a medicine in certain countries. So you can still make those claims, but you have to categorize your product differently. So obviously a cosmetic product might, for some countries you can use anti-dandruff claims for that, but for some you can't. So I'm really sorry if I can't really answer that too much. I need to know a bit more about the markets that you're looking for in particular there, and the kind of claims and the kind of product. If you want any further information about that, please feel free to email me, and we can talk about that in a bit more detail. So sorry, that wasn't a very good answer. Have you got any other questions at all? So we've got a question in again. So are any research firms affected by product ingredient regulations, for example, a ban in D4 and D5? It's not really the research firms that get affected by product and ingredient bans, I have to say. Talking from experience, it's the product development that will get affected. So for us, we are looking at testing finished products. So our clients will come to us with the finished products they want to test with the claims they want to make on the product. And then, we test that product in particular particular. So obviously you cannot test a product with us if the ingredient is banned in the country that you're looking to test it, because we can't do that. So for example, there are certain types of products where we have clients that are based in the UK that want to launch it into the US, and they can use their product in the US because the ingredient isn't banned, but it's actually banned over in the EU over here. So we can't do that product test here. So yeah, it really depends on the where you're launching the product, again, what the bans are, and it depends on where it depends on the supplier, the manufacturer. You can't make the products if the ingredients are banned, so it doesn't really affect us to that point. I hope again if that makes sense. Do you have any other further questions at all? So this is actually a really good question. Are you aware of certain markets preferring certain panel sizes for user trials? Now, there is no regulation worldwide about the amount of panel sizes you need for user trials. It's very frustrating for people, because when I kind of suggest, you should be using this kind of panel size, there's no evidence to say that that panel size should be used. That's why I always say 100 responses is kind of the lowest that you're looking at for certain advertising platforms. So I should make that more clear. It's not the markets that say how much the panel size should be. It's actually the advertising platforms themselves may not find the panel size sufficient. So for example, we had a client who came to us because they were looking at putting advertising claims in flight magazines, and they only had clinical data about their product, which meant they only had a panel size of 30, and the airline said that's not big enough, we can't use that claim. So they then had to come to us to get consumer research data to further substantiate that clinical research, so they'd have a bigger panel size. So there's no particular country. So I can't say, you can have 50 for China, you can have 100 for the US. That doesn't really exist. It's just making sure that you have a large enough panel size that it is reflecting a robust amount of data. So if you're looking at putting your advert on a certain platform, they would be happy with that size. And again, that's why I always suggest 100. There are times when you can go as low as 50, and there are times that we have to go much higher than 100. It really depends on the claims, and it really depends on the product. So sorry, that's not much help in terms of market. But yeah, again, always ask for advice. I'm really happy with that one. If you've got any kind of claims in mind, again, it's all about being product specific. So again, that's a really important point on that. When you're looking at kind of doing advertising claims, when you're looking at products and you're looking at claims, every product is different. That's why there's no regulation. That's why if you go on the CTPA website, they don't say for a shampoo you need 100 responses, because it completely depends on the market that you're looking to launch into and what the range of consumers are in that market. It depends on the kind of claims you're trying to make. There's so many dependent factors, so it's always worth seeking advice if you're not sure. So we've got another couple of questions in, thank you. So let me read this one. Oh, sorry, my mouse is gone. If you are making raw material claims on your product, is this substantiated enough with raw material data, or do you need to use a trial to substantiate this, even though the claim is related to the raw material properties? That is an excellent question, and absolutely, it needs to be substantiated further through consumer research. The raw material data is not enough to say that the product can do what it can do. The raw material data is a great starting point though. So what we usually do with consumer perception claims, if people have made a product with all these raw materials and they say, right, turmeric supposed to be anti-inflammatory, all these kinds of different claims, we then say, okay, well now we're going to design a questionnaire that looks at all those different claims, brings them all together and says this product as a whole has these benefits. The problem is with raw material data is that there's nothing to say that when that's mixed in with certain other raw materials, they don't cancel each other out and they can't be perceived. There's nothing to say that there's not enough of that raw material in it that the consumer again can't perceive the effect. You need to have that consumer research data on the overall product. You can make claims about the ingredient on the product still. You can say this product contains this ingredient, but you cannot make any claims about what the product can do overall. And that can be as far as even naming the product. You cannot name a product, strengthening shampoo based on the raw ingredient claim, because you've got no perception data to say that that product makes a participant feel like their hair is stronger. So thank you for bringing that up. That's such an important one, and something that I think often gets very overlooked by people when it comes to substantiating claims. Okay, so we've got another question here. So have you found in your years of experience that one category needs a larger panel size compared to others? For example, skincare compared to color cosmetics. That's actually a really good example, because I was going to say not really, because again, it all depends on the claims, but certainly skincare compared to color cosmetics. And the reason for that being is, for example, if you were testing like a lipstick, you would say, 100 participants is enough, because they just want to say the color is bold and that it stays on the lips all day. Whereas for skincare, you might say, well, we want to say it's suitable for all skin types. So then we're looking at about 50 participants of each skin type that's available. Whereas, you're not necessarily going to be looking at that for color cosmetics. So certainly, if that's the example that I would give for that. Whereas, for hair care, again, you're probably looking at larger sample sizes as well, really depending on the product. Like I said, if it's a styling product like a hairspray, you're probably looking at about 100 participants. Whereas if you're looking at getting a claim about all kind of hair types and things like that, you're definitely going to be looking at a larger panel size. Do we have any further questions at all? I'll leave that open for a couple of minutes. I can't see any further questions coming in, and I don't want to hold everyone up too much. But I am, oh, sorry, one more question coming in, sorry. Okay, so we said, what about the claim with nourishing almond oil? Is this claim perceived as attributing the property to the finished product and therefore at risk, if only based on the raw material data? So with nourishing almond oil, you can say that there is raw ingredients. You are only specifying the oil itself. You're saying that it's with nourishing almond oil. But what you couldn't do is call it nourishing hair oil or something like that, because again, you're saying it's with nourishing almond oil, but the actual product itself doesn't. I would also avoid that, to be honest, because if I'm choosing a product myself, and I don't think this is just because I'm in the industry and I understand it, but if I was looking at one product that says it's a nourishing hair oil, it makes your hair softer, it makes your hair smoother, and another product that just says hair oil with nourishing almond oil, I'm going to choose the product that has all these amazing claims about what the product does itself, rather just the one claim on there that says that it's got that ingredient in it. So yes. I hope that explains that one. How do you guarantee reliability of the results generated and therefore sorry, I'm not going to say the word. How do you verify the basically the data from the participants to ensure that the client's target claim is also verified? So we have a very important process that we have in place when we recruit our volunteers, but also when we gather the volunteers, we do an auditing at the end to make sure that the participants have answered it. We don't expect every single one of our participants to answer the questionnaire. I think that's really important to make sure that there's some leeway. So for example, for 100 responses in the UK, we need 120 participants. If all 120 went and answered it, I wouldn't necessarily, but it's just unlikely because not every single participant is going to answer that product. So it's allowing our participants to drop off if they can't do the questionnaire for any reason, as long as they have a valid reason. When we recruit them, we make sure that they're able to do the study at the time. We can do things like verify their location. Well, their location's already verified anyway because we send them the product to test in their home. We do an audit process at the end. So we select participants and call them and ask them questions about the product that they could only know if they'd used it. There's lots and lots of different processes we've had in place to make sure that we're able to make sure that, that they can be verified. Our participants, they love testing products. Every single one of our panelists, they absolutely love it, and there's no reason for them to lie. Like I said, we give them the opportunity to say that they can't use the product for any reason. So there's no point for them to say that they have used it if they haven't used it. It's also really important because we're part of the Market Research Society, which means that we cannot reward our participants anyway. It's not part of their code of conduct. We can't pay our participants for taking part in a study. And what this means is they only get the free product that they receive. There's no kind of benefit for them to say, okay, you're going to get £40 if you answer the questionnaire. That kind of promotes that risk of them lying and saying they have used the product. They just get the free product for the post. If they don't answer the questionnaire, they don't answer the questionnaire. And they have to, as I said, they have to have a reason, otherwise they get taken off the system. They can't just receive products and not answer the questionnaire. But it also makes sure that the product, the actual data that they're giving us is completely valid as well. It's completely unbiased. There's no bias towards like, oh, I think if I, write a lot about this product that's really being really good, they're going to give me more money. That's not possible at all. So there's a lot, I said there's a lot of things in place. If you want further information on that, again, I can if you can email me and I can give you some more kind of clarification about what kind of procedures we have in place to verify our responses. Any further questions at all? I'm going to leave it open again because I know a few came in when I left it before. Just give that a second longer, but as mentioned, my email, so basically what I'm going to do is after this, after the webinar, I'm going to send you all from my email address the recording, so you've got access to the recording, and also a short film that we've produced, which kind of summarizes all the points about substantiating claims for hair care, so you can have a look at that as well. So I'll send that over and then you can respond to my email if you've got any further questions at all. I've got one more question come in. I'm going to answer this question and then I'm going to finish the answers for today because I don't want to keep people too long. So how useful are consumer research studies in predicting the potential success of new product ideas? They are incredibly successful. So we can do it sort of different ways. You can do it through a consumer research study with a product, or we can just do online research. We don't even have to send them a product. We can send them the branding. We could send them just some questions about, how your product would be accepted. But the good thing is, what I didn't mention earlier, is that we've got a huge database of panelists. So when I was saying about the verifiability, so we've got over 560,000 consumer participants worldwide. 360 of those are in the UK alone because that's where we started. So that's just organically really grown. And what it means is we can really have a niche direction on the panel that you're looking at. So if you're talking about a new product idea and you know that market that you want to test it on. So for example, if it was a natural organic product like a conditioning bar, you could say, right, I want to find people that are based in the US nationally in different states that currently use natural products or use organic products and that are interested in using a conditioning bar. And I'm going to talk to them about my branding, I'm going to talk to them about my idea for the product. I'm going to talk to them about why would you use this product? What does this ingredient mean to you? It's endless. And then you can get some fantastic data before you even thought about making your product and before you even thought about releasing it. You can do the same thing with the product test. You can send them that conditioning bar, but again, base it on that and ask those marketing questions. So after you've got your efficacy data, you can then kind of reveal a bit more about the brand and say, this is the kind of branding and things like that. And your options are very limitless when it comes to consumer research. And they're very successful. We've had some really good case studies from our clients where they have been able to predict the success of their new product ideas. We've had, case studies where they've not accepted the product very well in the key markets they want to go to. There's one brand that we work with, it's a luxury skincare brand, and it's incredibly well successful in the UK and the US. But we tested it in China and they didn't like the product very much. And it was to do with the fragrance. It was to do with the consistency, and it meant with the consistency to do with the usage directions, they didn't use the product correctly because they were used to a different consistency for that kind of product. Sorry, I don't want to go on too much about it, but basically it meant that they were able to reformulate the product before launching it into China, making sure that they were able to sell more products when they did it there. I am going to just answer this one last question and then I am going to move on. So who decides on both on the target customers test panel, the client, you, or both? It's completely different. So we are very versatile in the way that we work. We work with some humongous conglomerates. We work with huge kind of supermarkets. We work with people that are startup brands. We've got clients that have made, a hand cream in their kitchen in the west coast of California. You know what I mean? We've got a huge kind of broad client database, and we really pride ourselves on our versatility there and how, every customer is, bespoke. Every study is bespoke. The reason I'm saying that is because that kind of can decide who's going to be making what decisions about the test. So it could be, you know, those large conglomerates, they have a very clear idea of who their consumer panel is, because that's how they're marketing their products. So they could say, you know, we know the people that buy our products are these kinds of women that shop here, that kind of thing. And then we just, we take their requirements and we test the study using those requirements. Or we might have, you know, like I said, that woman that's kind of producing a hand cream in her kitchen, and she's saying, oh, I don't really know who's going to buy this product. Can we talk about it together? And we talk about it together. So it's always a collaboration. I think that's how I like to think about our studies. It's always a collaboration. There's never one point where we say, okay, you're going to talk about it, we're not going to help you. Or the other point where we say, you know, we're going to decide on it and you don't get any say. It's always a collaboration until the points where people, you know, are very clear and they say, we don't need your help. We know who our target panel is. Unless we thought, you know, this is ridiculous, you're not going to be able to test that kind of product on that kind of person. But that doesn't tend to happen. So I am going to leave the question and answers there though, but like I said, please email me if you have any further questions at all, and I really hope that I've been able to answer your questions. And again, if you need any further clarification, if you don't feel like I answered your question, please email me as well. So I'm just going to finish off by talking about the Society of Cosmetic Chemists. So we're on the PR committee for the SCS, which is the UK Society of Cosmetic Chemists. If any of you, cosmetic scientists, sorry. So obviously there are kind of different worldwide ones, which are all part of the IFSCC. But we deal with the SCS. So they've got their distance learning course, which I would really, really recommend if you are at a point like I am, where you're just working from home, if you've been furloughed for any reason. Obviously there's a lot going on in the world right now, and you might find yourself a lot more free time, or just, you know, kind of bored at home, not being able to go out and do anything. And you might think, actually, I really want to take this opportunity to increase my education. Well, the SCS distance learning course is a recognised diploma course in the field of essential science. So have a look on the website. That can be done anywhere in the world. It's distance learning. I know a lot of people that have done that course and have had excellent careers that have driven from that. So really worth looking at if you've got that spare time. And then also I want to talk about the 32nd IFSCC Congress, which is due to happen in London on the 19th to 22nd of September 2022. It's a little while off yet, which is obviously a good thing, again, knowing how many events are being cancelled at the moment. But you can register your interest at their website now. I'm just going to leave the contact information there for you. So that's for our main inbox. And again, if you want to talk to me directly, I'm going to send a follow-up email, which will give you my mobile number and my email address and everything like that. But I really hope that you feel like you learned a lot from today's webinar. Any further questions, please feel free to ask. Like I said, I'm on LinkedIn all the time, on my email all the time. And I'd really like to be able to kind of help you all a bit more if you've got any further questions. Thank you very much again. And I hope you all have a really good day. And yeah, thank you.